In the heart of a forgotten land, there lay a forest unlike any other. Known as the Forest of Eternal Calm, it was whispered to be a sanctuary where time moved slower and the air hummed with serenity. Travelers spoke in hushed tones about this mystical place, saying it held the power to heal hearts burdened by life's turmoil. This was not an ordinary forest. Its trees glistened with silver bark, and their leaves shimmered in hues of emerald and gold. Birds sang melodies so soft and hypnotic that wanderers often found themselves lulled into a dreamlike state. At its center was a lake so still and clear it mirrored the sky perfectly, creating an illusion of walking among clouds. The forest, however, was not easily found. Hidden behind mountains and concealed by a maze of rivers and valleys, only those with pure intentions could hope to stumble upon its sacred boundaries. It was said that the forest chose its visitors, calling out to souls in need of healing. Ilara was one such soul. A young woman with dreams once bright as a summer's day, her life had become overshadowed by chaos and sleepless nights. The demands of her world left her exhausted. Each morning, she woke to the weight of unfinished tasks and worries that clung to her like shadows. Her laughter, once spontaneous and joyous, had become a distant memory. One fateful evening, as she sat by her window watching the stars, a whisper seemed to float on the night breeze. It was soft yet insistent, like a melody she had long forgotten. Intrigued, she followed the whisper into the woods near her village. Each step felt lighter, as if the very ground urged her forward. Days turned into nights as she wandered deeper into uncharted lands. Her feet, though weary, seemed guided by an unseen force. Finally, as dawn broke on the 7th day, she found herself standing at the edge of the Forest of Eternal Calm. The silver canopy shimmered before her, and she felt an inexplicable sense of belonging. The moment Ilara stepped beneath the silver canopy, a gentle breeze wrapped around her like an embrace, and she felt her worries begin to dissolve. The air carried a subtle fragrance, a blend of wildflowers and rain-soaked earth. She marveled at the beauty surrounding her. Every leaf seemed to glow with its own light, and the forest floor was a carpet of soft moss interspersed with vibrant blossoms. The birds' songs, harmonious and soothing, seemed to echo the rhythm of her heartbeat. As she ventured deeper, Ilara encountered the first of the forest's inhabitants, a wise fox with eyes like amber gems. The fox spoke, its voice as smooth as a flowing stream. "Welcome, traveler. You carry the weight of many burdens. This forest is a sanctuary for those who seek peace. Walk with me, and I shall guide you." Ilara followed the fox through winding paths that seemed to change with every step. They passed by trees that whispered secrets of the ages and streams that sang gentle lullabies. Along the way, Ilara felt her mind quieting, her thoughts slowing until all that remained was the present moment. As the journey continued, Ilara met other creatures who shared the forest's magic. A deer with antlers that glowed faintly led her to a glade where sunlight danced through the leaves, creating patterns that seemed alive. There, she rested and felt her body rejuvenate. A robin perched on her shoulder, chirping softly as if carrying her whispered fears away on its wings. Each creature she encountered seemed to understand her unspoken thoughts, guiding her to places of beauty and stillness. In one clearing, she found an ancient tree with roots that formed a natural bench. Sitting beneath its vast canopy, she listened as the tree's voice rumbled like distant thunder, sharing stories of resilience and renewal. "Even the mightiest storms cannot break me," it said. "They only shape me, making me stronger. So too will your trials shape you." The climax of Ilara's journey came when she reached the heart of the forest, the Mirror Lake. As she gazed into its still surface, she was mesmerized by its clarity. The lake reflected the sky so perfectly that it felt as though she was standing among the clouds. But as she looked closer, the lake began to glow softly, and she saw not her reflection but her happiest memories. Each ripple brought forth an image: her mother's laughter as they baked bread together, the warmth of her father's embrace after a long day, the joy of running barefoot through fields with her childhood friends. These were moments she had thought lost, buried beneath the weight of her struggles. Tears streamed down her face, not from sorrow but from the profound sense of gratitude and love that filled her heart. As the night fell, stars appeared in the sky and were mirrored in the lake below, creating a breathtaking tapestry of light. Ilara lay by the lake's edge and fell into the deepest, most restful sleep of her life. In her dreams, she felt the forest's magic weave through her soul, mending wounds she hadn't realized were there. When morning came, sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting golden beams across the forest. Ilara woke feeling lighter than she had in years. The creatures she had met gathered to bid her farewell, their presence a silent reminder that she would always carry a piece of the forest within her. As she stepped out of the forest, she noticed the world seemed different, or perhaps it was she who had changed. The chaos that once consumed her now felt distant, and in its place was a profound sense of peace. She returned to her village, her heart lightened by the magic of the forest. She shared her story with others, inspiring them to seek serenity and to cherish the simple, beautiful moments of life. The forest had always been a place of magic, but its enchantment was not just in the towering trees or the shimmering rivers. It extended far beyond Ilara's first experience, wrapping itself around every visitor who sought its embrace. As more travelers found their way to the heart of the forest, something remarkable began to happen. Each individual was greeted not with the same song, but with one that resonated uniquely with their spirit. It was as if the forest could hear their deepest yearnings, their unspoken desires, and responded with a melody meant just for them. Ilara had heard whispers about this magic, but never had she fully understood its depth until now. She saw it in the faces of the new visitors, their eyes wide with wonder as they listened to the melodies that called to them. For one, the song was gentle, like the first rays of dawn, soothing and calm. For another, it was fierce, a cry of strength and determination, urging them to push through the darkness within. Each song carried a lesson, a reminder of what each soul needed to rediscover about themselves. The forest was not just a place of healing for the body, but for the soul. People came to the woods broken, with hearts shattered by loss or despair, but they left with a new sense of purpose, as though the melodies had restored the very essence of their being. Ilara had witnessed the transformation in those who sought solace in the forest, and she felt a stirring deep within her. She realized that the forest's magic was more than just a remedy for pain, it was a guide, a teacher, and a guardian. It taught that healing was not a destination, but a journey, one that was never completed without embracing the self. The new visitors, with their unique stories, revealed the deeper secrets of the forest. They shared tales of their struggles, their triumphs, and how they had found strength in the melodies that had echoed through the trees. Some had been on the verge of giving up, but the forest had rekindled the flickering light of hope within them. Others had come seeking clarity, unsure of their purpose, only to find that the forest songs had illuminated their path, guiding them toward a deeper understanding of themselves. Through these stories, Ilara began to understand the true nature of the forest's magic. It was not just about the melodies or the healing, it was about connection. The forest's power lay not only in its ability to mend what was broken, but in its capacity to bring people together. Each soul that entered became a thread in the larger tapestry of life, woven together by the forest's timeless song. Ilara felt a profound sense of gratitude. The forest had given her so much already, but now, she realized, it was also teaching her how to give back. She began to listen more closely to the songs that surrounded her, allowing them to shape her own understanding of resilience and renewal. She knew now that the forest's magic was not something to be hoarded or guarded, it was a gift to be shared, a gift that could bring light into even the darkest corners of the world. The forest, despite its peaceful nature, was not untouched by darkness. It was a place of light and healing, yes, but it was also a realm where shadows lurked, waiting for those who were vulnerable to their pull. Not everyone who ventured into the forest sought peace or solace. There were those whose hearts were burdened by darker intentions, individuals who came not to heal, but to take, to manipulate, or to destroy. It was during one such arrival that Ilara first witnessed the forest's protective spirits in action. A man entered the forest, cloaked in shadow, his intentions masked by a veil of false innocence. His heart was heavy with greed, and his mind clouded with a desire for power. He had heard of the forest's magic, and believed that by taking it for himself, he could control the very fabric of life. As the man stepped deeper into the woods, the air grew thick, and the once welcoming melodies turned cold and dissonant. The trees seemed to lean away from him, their branches curling as though to shield themselves. It was as if the forest itself was aware of his presence, and it responded with a force that was both protective and foreboding. Ilara, watching from the shadows, felt the shift in the atmosphere. She had always believed in the benevolent magic of the forest, but she had never seen it confront an intruder with such intensity. The forest was no longer just a sanctuary, it was a fortress, and it would not allow its heart to be tainted by those who sought to corrupt it. The protective spirits of the forest emerged, their forms ethereal and shifting, like whispers of the wind. They circled the man, their presence unsettling, yet undeniable. They did not speak, but their intentions were clear. This man was not welcome. The forest was not to be taken, not to be controlled by those who sought only their own gain. The man, realizing that the forest would not yield to him, grew agitated. He attempted to push through, to force his way deeper into the woods, but with each step he took, the spirits grew stronger. The air grew colder, the shadows darker, and the very ground beneath him seemed to resist his movement. The forest was testing him, challenging him to face the darkness within his own soul. And so, the trial of shadows began. The spirits did not attack the man directly. Instead, they mirrored his inner turmoil, reflecting his fears, his doubts, and the shadows of his past. Each step he took into the forest brought him closer to the truth of who he truly was, and the more he resisted, the more intense the trial became. He found himself battling not just the forest's magic, but the shadows of his own soul. Ilara watched in awe as the man struggled, his heart torn between his desire for power and the realization that the forest was not something to be dominated. The trial was not just a test of strength, it was a test of character, of the choices one made when faced with darkness. The forest was not a place for conquest, but for redemption. In the end, the man faltered, his resolve crumbling under the weight of the forest's judgment. He sank to his knees, his heart heavy with remorse. The protective spirits, sensing his change of heart, withdrew, allowing him a moment of reflection. The forest had shown him the consequences of his choices, but it had also offered him a path to redemption. The trial of shadows had not been won through force, it had been won through humility, self-reflection, and the willingness to confront the darkness within. The man, now changed, left the forest with a newfound understanding of the power of choice. As Ilara watched him depart, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons the forest had taught her. The shadows, though dark, were not to be feared, they were a part of the journey. The forest had shown her that redemption was possible for those willing to face their inner darkness, and that the light of the forest could heal even the deepest wounds. The forest had always been a place of mystery, but there were layers to its enigma that even Ilara had yet to uncover. As she delved deeper into its secrets, she began to sense the presence of something, someone, beyond the trees and the spirits. There was an ancient power at work, one that held the forest together and maintained its delicate balance. It was during one of her solitary walks through the woods that Ilara first encountered the Keeper of Time. The figure appeared as if from nowhere, a shadow among shadows. His presence was both calming and unsettling, as though he existed outside the boundaries of time itself. His appearance was ageless, his face marked by both wisdom and sorrow, as though he had seen the rise and fall of countless seasons. The Keeper of Time spoke with a voice that seemed to echo through the very fabric of the forest. "You have come far, Ilara. But there is still much you must learn." Ilara stood in awe, feeling as though the forest itself had come alive in the presence of this figure. The Keeper of Time was not just a guardian, he was the weaver of the forest's fate, the one who ensured its continued existence. As he spoke, Ilara learned the truth about the forest's origins. It was not a random creation, nor was it simply a sanctuary for the lost. The forest had a purpose, a greater role to play in the balance of the world. It was a living entity, one that had existed for centuries, preserving the delicate balance between light and dark, growth and decay, life and death. The Keeper of Time explained that the forest had been born from the first breath of creation, its roots intertwined with the very fabric of the universe. It was not just a sanctuary for those in need of healing, it was a guardian, a protector of the natural world. Its magic was ancient, its power vast, and its purpose far-reaching. But the forest's survival was not guaranteed. It required the care and protection of those who understood its importance. It required guardians like Ilara, who could stand against the forces that sought to destroy it. The Keeper of Time had watched her journey, had seen her strength and determination, and had chosen her to carry the mantle of protection. Ilara's heart swelled with a sense of responsibility. She understood now that her connection to the forest was deeper than she had ever realized. She was not just a visitor, she was a guardian, a keeper of the forest's secrets, and a protector of its magic. With the Keeper of Time's guidance, Ilara began to understand her own strength. She was not just a healer or a guide, she was a force of nature, a part of the forest's eternal cycle. The Keeper of Time had revealed to her the truth of her lineage, and she realized that her destiny was forever entwined with the fate of the forest. The Keeper of Time's final words to Ilara were a reminder that time was both a gift and a burden. The forest's magic is eternal, but it is not infinite. You must guard it well, for the future of the world depends on it. As the Keeper of Time vanished back into the shadows of the forest, Ilara stood in silence, her heart full of purpose. She knew that her journey was far from over, that she had much to learn and many challenges to face. But she also knew that she was ready. The forest had chosen her, and she would stand by its side, guarding its magic and ensuring its survival for generations to come. Ilara's journey through the forest had always been one of discovery. With every step, she uncovered new truths about the land, its magic, and herself. But it was during this chapter of her life that she began to uncover the most profound truth of all. The forest was not just a place of healing, it was a place of memory. The deeper Ilara ventured into the heart of the woods, the more she felt the pull of an ancient presence, a force that seemed to whisper her name. It was not the spirit she had come to know, but something older, something tied to her own bloodline. The forest had a memory, and that memory was woven into the very fabric of her existence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest was bathed in the golden light of dusk, Ilara stumbled upon a hidden grove. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine, and the trees seemed to hum with a quiet energy. In the center of the grove stood an ancient stone, its surface etched with intricate symbols. As she approached, Ilara felt a surge of recognition. The symbols were familiar, as though she had seen them before in a distant dream. Her heart raced, and a sense of belonging washed over her. It was then that the forest's memory began to unfold before her eyes. She saw images of her ancestors, strong, resilient individuals who had once walked these same paths. They had been guardians of the forest long before her time, protectors of its magic and its secrets. Their blood ran through her veins, and their strength pulsed within her. The grove was not just a place of memory, it was a place of connection. The forest's magic had always been tied to her lineage, and now, she understood why she had been chosen. She was not just a healer or a protector, she was part of the forest story, a continuation of a legacy that had spanned generations. As Ilara knelt before the ancient stone, she whispered a prayer of gratitude to her ancestors. She understood now that her journey was not just her own, it was the culmination of 1,000 stories, 1,000 lives that had shaped the forest and its magic. The forest had revealed its deepest secret to her, the interconnectedness of all life, the bond between past and present, and the responsibility she bore to protect the legacy of those who had come before her. The forest had always been a place of transformation, but now, it was time for Ilara's own transformation. She had learned so much during her journey, about the forest, its magic, and herself. But now, the time had come for the final act of her story. In the quiet of the forest heart, as the first light of dawn kissed the earth, Ilara stood before the great tree that had once welcomed her. Its roots stretched deep into the earth, its branches reaching for the sky, and its leaves shimmered with the essence of the forest's magic. Ilara knew that this moment was the culmination of everything she had learned. The magic of the forest and her own spirit were intertwined, and now, they would merge into something greater than either could be alone. She stepped forward, her hands outstretched, and as she touched the tree, a surge of energy flowed through her. It was as if the forest itself was breathing life into her, sharing its essence, its magic, and its wisdom. Ilara felt the forest heartbeat in her chest, and she knew that she was no longer just a visitor or a guardian. She was one with the forest, its magic, and its eternal song. In that moment, Ilara understood the true meaning of the forest's gift. It was not just a gift of healing or power, it was a gift of peace, of harmony, and of balance. The forest had given her everything she needed to protect it, but more than that, it had shown her the eternal gift of connection. As Ilara stood beneath the great tree, the forest whispered its final song, a melody of peace that would echo through the ages. She had become part of its story, and in doing so, she had ensured its survival for generations to come. The forest's legacy would live on, carried by her and by all those who had walked its paths before her. And so, the story closed, not with an end, but with a beginning. The beginning of a new chapter, one that would continue to unfold as long as the forest's song echoed through the hearts of those who sought its magic. The eternal gift of peace, a legacy woven into the very fabric of the earth, would live on forever. Far out on the edge of a misty sea, where the waves whispered ancient tales, stood an ancient lighthouse. Its beam sliced through the fog like a guardian, tirelessly watching over the waters. The lighthouse had weathered countless storms, its stones bearing the marks of time. The light it cast was not just a beacon for ships, but a symbol of unwavering hope in a world often filled with uncertainty. Marlowe, the lighthouse keeper, was a quiet, solitary figure. An elderly man with silver hair and a weathered face, he had spent his entire life tending to the lighthouse. Each night, without fail, he climbed the spiral staircase, lit the great lamp, and gazed out into the sea. It was a routine that had become second nature to him. His only companion was his cat, Clementine, who was as much a part of the lighthouse as the beam itself. Marlowe's life had been one of solitude, and he had never minded it. The lighthouse was his home, and the sea his constant companion. He found peace in the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the shore. But beneath the surface of this quiet life, there was a secret, one that Marlowe had carried with him for many years. Inside the base of the lighthouse, hidden behind a secret door, was a small chamber. This chamber was unlike any other part of the lighthouse. It was filled with jars, beautiful, glass jars, each glowing softly with a faint light. These jars contained something truly extraordinary. They held dreams. Marlowe had discovered this strange gift when he was a young man, fresh to the role of lighthouse keeper. It had been an accident, really. One night, as he was tending to the lamp, he noticed a strange, shimmering light in the corner of the room. When he investigated, he found a small jar, glowing softly in the darkness. Inside, he could see swirling, misty shapes, dreams that had drifted too far from their sleepers. Since that night, Marlowe had dedicated his life to collecting these dreams. He had come to realize that some dreams wandered too far from their owners, lost in the vastness of the world. But the lighthouse, with its powerful light, could capture them, giving them a place to rest. And Marlowe had taken it upon himself to keep them safe. As the years passed, Marlowe became known not just as the keeper of the lighthouse, but as the keeper of dreams. He rarely spoke of the chamber, and no one knew about the jars. But it was his sacred duty to protect them. The dreams were fragile, delicate things, and Marlowe understood the importance of keeping them safe. It was a quiet existence, one filled with the rhythms of the sea and the soft glow of the jars. But that night, as Marlowe climbed the staircase and gazed out over the water, something felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, and the winds carried with them a strange sense of urgency. The lighthouse, it seemed, was about to play a role in something far greater than it had ever known before. The storm arrived without warning. One minute, the sea was calm, the skies clear, and the next, the heavens opened in fury. The wind screamed like a wounded animal, rattling the windows of the lighthouse. The waves churned violently, crashing against the rocks with a force that threatened to shake the very foundation of the lighthouse. Marlowe stood at the window, watching the storm with a steady gaze. He had seen storms like this before, but something felt different this time. The storm seemed more alive. The winds howled, and the sea rose like a beast with a mind of its own. Yet, the lighthouse stood firm, its beam slicing through the darkness. The storm was not the only thing that felt different. Marlowe had a sense of unease deep in his chest, an inexplicable pull that he couldn't ignore. His hand instinctively went to the hidden door that led to the Chamber of Dreams. He didn't know why, but something was calling to him, urging him to check on the jars. He descended the stairs quickly, his boots echoing against the stone. When he reached the chamber, the sight that greeted him made his heart skip a beat. One of the jars was glowing brighter than the others. The light pulsed with an intensity that was almost otherworldly. Marlowe had never seen anything like it before. It wasn't just a dream. It felt like something more, a force, a presence that was not of this world. He reached out slowly, his hand trembling. The moment his fingers brushed against the jar, a rush of images flooded his mind. He saw flashes of a sailor, a young man with dark eyes, his face twisted in fear. The images were fragmented, but one thing was clear: the sailor was lost, adrift in a sea of nightmares. Marlowe jerked his hand away, the vision fading as quickly as it had come. He stared at the jar, his mind racing. What did it mean? Who was the sailor? And why had this dream come to him? The storm outside intensified, the wind howling louder than ever. Marlowe's thoughts were a whirlwind, but one thing was clear: the lighthouse was calling to him. The light from the jar was no ordinary light. It was a beacon for someone, something that needed his help. He didn't know how he knew, but Marlowe understood. He had a duty to this dream, just as he had a duty to all the others. The storm was not just a storm. It was a sign that the lighthouse's purpose was not yet fulfilled. There was a dream in need of saving, and Marlowe was the one who had to protect it. The storm raged on throughout the night, its fury unmatched by anything Marlowe had experienced before. The winds howled like a chorus of lost souls, and the waves crashed violently against the rocks, their dark bodies rising higher with each passing minute. The lighthouse's beam fought valiantly against the storm, but it was clear that something more than nature's wrath was at play. Something, or someone, was being pulled toward the lighthouse. Marlowe had stayed at the base of the tower, his thoughts consumed by the mysterious jar and the sailor in his vision. He couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't just a random occurrence. It had a purpose, and that purpose was somehow linked to the dream he had glimpsed. The glowing jar, with its intensity and urgency, seemed to beckon him towards something beyond his understanding. As the night dragged on, Marlowe's gaze never left the beam of light. He knew that whatever was coming had to find its way through the storm, and the lighthouse would be its guide. But just as dawn began to break, a loud crash echoed from the shore, followed by the sound of something, or someone, struggling against the sea. Marlowe's heart skipped a beat. Without a second thought, he grabbed his coat, tossed open the door, and stepped into the violent wind. He squinted into the darkness, his eyes searching for the source of the commotion. Through the driving rain and swirling mist, he spotted a figure, half drowned, clinging to a rock near the shoreline. Without hesitation, Marlowe ran toward him, his footsteps slipping on the wet ground. The sailor was barely conscious, his body battered by the relentless waves. Marlowe reached him just in time, pulling the sailor from the rocks and dragging him toward the safety of the lighthouse. "Hold on, lad!" Marlowe shouted, his voice lost in the storm, but the sailor seemed to hear. With a weak cough, the sailor's eyes flickered open, and Marlowe could see the fear in them. It was the same fear he had glimpsed in the dream. The sailor's name was Jonas, he later learned. He had been at sea for months, running from nightmares that plagued him every night, robbing him of his peace. As they made their way back to the lighthouse, Jonas collapsed in Marlowe's arms, his body too weak to carry on. Inside the warmth of the lighthouse, Marlowe laid Jonas on a cot and quickly set to work tending to his injuries. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the lighthouse, the air was warm and calm. Marlowe's hands moved with practiced ease, but his mind was consumed by a single thought. This sailor, this lost soul, had been brought to him for a reason. The jar of light was no longer just a mysterious object. It was the key to Jonas's salvation. The storm outside seemed to grow louder with each passing hour. The wind howled through the cracks in the lighthouse, and the rain lashed against the windows with a ferocity that felt unnatural. Yet, within the warm walls of the lighthouse, there was a calmness, a sense of safety that Marlowe had come to cherish over the years. Jonas was recovering, slowly but surely. His injuries were not as severe as they first seemed, but his exhaustion and mental fatigue were much deeper. Marlowe had prepared a simple meal for him, and the two men sat in silence, eating by the soft glow of the fireplace. Clementine, ever the observer, sat curled up near the hearth, her eyes half closed in contentment. As the evening wore on, Jonas's demeanor began to change. The fear and anxiety that had gripped him since his arrival started to ease, replaced by a quiet curiosity. He had heard the stories of the lighthouse keeper, the man who tended to the light and protected dreams, but he had never truly believed in such things. "Why do you do it?" Jonas asked suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was hoarse from the storm, but there was a deep sincerity in it. "Why do you keep the light burning every night? I've seen lighthouses before, but none like this." Marlowe paused, his hand resting on the jar of light he had brought with him. The jar was now sitting on the table beside Jonas, its soft glow casting a comforting radiance over the room. "There's a purpose to everything," Marlowe replied quietly, his voice steady. "The light, the dreams, it's not just about guiding ships through the night. It's about helping those who have lost their way. Some people lose their dreams, or their hope, and it's my duty to protect that." Jonas looked at the jar in awe, his eyes wide. "Are you saying that you can capture dreams?" Marlowe nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Yes, but it's not as simple as it sounds. Dreams are fragile things. They drift away, lost in the sea of the mind, and the lighthouse helps to gather them, to give them a safe place to rest." Jonas's eyes flickered with something like wonder, but there was also a trace of skepticism in his gaze. "And this jar, this light, can really help me?" Marlowe didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took the jar and placed it gently on the bedside table next to Jonas. The light from the jar seemed to grow brighter, as if sensing the weight of the moment. "The light has a way of soothing troubled minds. It can help you sleep without fear. But you have to trust it." Jonas stared at the jar, his mind racing. He had spent years fighting nightmares, trying everything to escape them, but nothing had worked. Could this truly be the answer? Could this light offer him the peace he so desperately sought? "I don't know if I can trust it," Jonas whispered. "I don't know if I can trust anything anymore." Marlowe sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Trust doesn't come easily, but sometimes, you have to give yourself a chance to believe." The night that followed was unlike any other Jonas had known. The storm outside had finally begun to subside, though the wind still whispered through the cracks in the lighthouse. Inside, however, all was calm, and the gentle glow of the jar cast a soft, golden hue over the room. Jonas lay in the cot, staring at the jar beside him. It glowed steadily, almost hypnotically, its light flickering like a flame caught in the wind. He could feel its warmth radiating into the room, yet it was a comforting warmth, not the kind that threatened to consume. For the first time in years, his mind was quiet. The voices of his nightmares, the dark shapes that had haunted him for so long, seemed distant, almost non-existent. He reached out with trembling hands and gently touched the jar, his fingers brushing the cool glass. The moment he made contact, a surge of calmness flooded his chest. It wasn't just physical comfort, it was something deeper, something spiritual. The light, it seemed, wasn't merely illuminating the room, it was illuminating his soul. Marlowe, who had been sitting quietly by the fire, watching the sea through the window, glanced over at Jonas. He saw the change in the sailor's expression, his furrowed brow had softened, and there was a sense of peace in his eyes that had been absent before. "How do you feel?" Marlowe asked, his voice soft but filled with genuine curiosity. Jonas didn't answer immediately. He sat up in the cot, gazing at the jar as though seeing it for the first time. The light, which had once seemed strange and foreign to him, now felt like an old friend, a source of safety and hope. "I feel," Jonas began, his voice thick with emotion. I feel like I can breathe again. Like the weight that's been on my chest for years has finally lifted. Marlowe nodded, his heart swelling with a quiet sense of fulfillment. This was why he did what he did, why he had spent his life tending to the lighthouse and guarding the dreams it captured. It wasn't about the physical labor or the ritual. It was about helping people like Jonas find the peace they had lost. For the first time in months, Jonas closed his eyes without fear. The nightmares that had plagued him, nightmares of drowning, of being chased by shadowy figures, were absent. Instead, he dreamed of calm seas, of light shining through the fog, of a lighthouse standing tall against the storm. The jar's glow seemed to pulse in rhythm with his dreams, as if it were guiding him, like the beam of the lighthouse that had brought him to safety. Hours passed, and Jonas drifted into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. Marlowe sat by the fire, watching over him, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. He had done his part. He had given Jonas a chance at peace, just as he had given countless others before him. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a calmness that was almost surreal. The sea was still, the sky clear, and the sun cast golden light over the lighthouse. The air smelled of salt and earth, fresh and invigorating. It was as if the world had been cleansed, renewed by the tempest that had swept through. Jonas awoke slowly, blinking against the sunlight that filtered through the window. He felt lighter, as though a heavy burden had been lifted from his soul. The nightmares had not returned, and in their place was a peaceful quiet. For the first time in years, he felt rested and whole. Marlowe was sitting at the small wooden table, sipping a cup of tea. Clementine, the cat, was perched on the windowsill, basking in the warmth of the sun. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks outside filled the silence, and Jonas felt a sense of tranquility settle over him. How do you feel? Marlowe asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. Jonas stretched, savoring the unfamiliar feeling of peace. I feel like I've been given a second chance, he said, his voice still a little hoarse from the storm. I can't remember the last time I slept like that. Marlowe smiled, his eyes kind but wise. Sometimes, all we need is a little light to guide us through the darkness. You've been through a lot, Jonas. The nightmares, the sea, it's all taken its toll. But now, you've found something that can help you heal. Jonas looked at the jar of light, still glowing softly beside him. He knew that it wasn't just the jar that had healed him, it was the kindness of the lighthouse keeper, the warmth of the light, and the safety that had been offered to him when he was most in need. I don't know how to thank you, Jonas said, his voice thick with gratitude. You've given me back my peace, something I thought I'd lost forever. Marlowe's eyes softened, and he stood up, walking over to the sailor. There's no need for thanks, Jonas. I've simply done what was meant to be done. But you have a journey ahead of you, and that light will guide you. Jonas nodded, understanding. He had come to the lighthouse a broken man, lost and hopeless. But now, he was leaving with something more valuable than he had ever known, hope. The morning passed quietly at the lighthouse, with Jonas and Marlowe working side by side in comfortable silence. The air was filled with the rhythm of routine, the steady hum of the lighthouse beam as it cut through the sky, the clink of tools as Marlowe tended to the lantern, and the soft purr of Clementine, who had nestled herself beside Jonas as he sat on the porch. Jonas had come to appreciate the simple life that Marlowe led. It was a life of purpose, of quiet rituals and acts of kindness. As the days passed, the weight of the past seemed to grow lighter, and Jonas found himself thinking less about the horrors he had faced at sea and more about the peace he had found on land. But despite the calmness he now felt, there was still a nagging pull deep inside him, a longing for the sea. The sea had been his life, his livelihood, and even in his darkest hours, it had been the one constant. He knew that someday, he would have to return to it, to the ship that waited for him out in the harbor. That evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Jonas stood at the edge of the lighthouse, looking out at the horizon. He felt the familiar tug of the sea, calling him back. It was as if the waves themselves were whispering his name, reminding him of the life he had left behind. Marlowe stood beside him, sensing the change in Jonas. He had known this moment would come. The sea had always been a part of Jonas, and it would be impossible to sever that bond completely. You're thinking of leaving, aren't you? Marlowe asked, his voice steady but filled with understanding. Jonas nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The sea has always been a part of me, Marlowe. It's where I belong. But now, after everything, I know I can return with a clearer mind. The nightmares, they won't follow me this time. Marlowe placed a hand on Jonas's shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. The sea will always be there, Jonas. But so will the light. If you ever need guidance, if you ever find yourself lost again, you know where to find it. Jonas smiled, a bittersweet expression crossing his face. "I'll never forget what you've done for me. I found peace here, and I'll carry that peace with me, no matter where I go." As Jonas walked down to the dock the next morning, carrying with him the jar of light that Marlowe had given him, he felt a sense of finality. It was time to return to his life on the sea, but he was no longer the same man who had arrived at the lighthouse weeks ago. He had found something that the sea could never offer, a sense of inner peace, a light that would guide him through the darkest storms. As the ship set sail, the lighthouse stood in the distance, its beam cutting through the fog, always watching, always waiting. Marlowe, standing at the top of the lighthouse, watched the ship disappear into the horizon. He knew that Jonas had found his way, and that was enough. Months passed, and life at the lighthouse returned to its usual rhythm. Marlowe continued his nightly rituals, tending to the light and ensuring that the dreams captured in the jars were safe. Clementine, as always, was his faithful companion, curled up at his feet or perched by the window, watching the world go by. Occasionally, Marlowe would receive visitors, lost souls who had found their way to the lighthouse in search of solace. Some came seeking refuge from the storms of their lives, while others simply needed a place to rest and recover. Each person who entered the lighthouse left with a piece of Marlowe's light, a gift of peace that would follow them wherever they went. One day, as Marlowe was walking along the shore, collecting driftwood for the fire, he noticed something strange. A small boat had washed ashore. It was weathered and worn, its wood cracked from years of exposure to the salt and wind. There was no sign of a sailor or anyone nearby, but as Marlowe examined the boat more closely, he saw something familiar. Inside the boat was a single jar of light, glowing softly in the morning sun. It was the same jar that Jonas had taken with him when he left the lighthouse months ago. Marlowe knelt beside the boat, his heart swelling with a mixture of emotions. He knew that Jonas had carried the light with him, but now it seemed that the jar had found its way back home, as if the light itself had returned to where it belonged. He picked up the jar gently, cradling it in his hands. It was still glowing, still holding the dreams and hopes of those who had come before. Marlowe knew that his work was far from over. The lighthouse was not just a physical structure, it was a symbol of something greater, a beacon of hope that would continue to shine, no matter the distance. As Marlowe placed the jar back in its rightful place inside the lighthouse, he thought of Jonas and the journey he had undertaken. He thought of the people who would come to the lighthouse in the future, each seeking a piece of light to guide them through their darkness. And he knew that as long as the lighthouse stood, as long as the light continued to shine, there would always be hope for those who needed it most. The years passed, and Marlowe grew older, his steps slower, his hands more weathered from the constant care he gave to the lighthouse. But his spirit remained as strong as ever, and he continued to serve as the guardian of the light, ensuring that the dreams of others were kept safe. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, Marlowe stood at the top of the lighthouse, gazing out at the horizon. The sea was calm, the air crisp, and the world seemed at peace. A faint sound reached his ears, a soft hum, like a melody carried on the wind. It was a sound he had not heard in many years, but one he recognized instantly. It was Jonas's voice. Marlowe's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the sound. In the distance, he saw a ship approaching, its sails billowing in the wind. As it drew closer, he could see Jonas standing at the helm, his face weathered but his eyes filled with determination. In his hands, he held a jar of light. Jonas had returned. As the ship docked and Jonas stepped onto the shore, Marlowe met him at the base of the lighthouse. Jonas was older now, but the peace that had once eluded him was still present in his eyes. "I knew I would find my way back here," Jonas said, his voice steady. "The light called me home." Marlowe smiled and placed a hand on Jonas's shoulder. "Welcome home, my friend." And so, the circle was complete. The light had guided Jonas back to where it had all begun, and now, the two men stood together, watching as the beacon of hope shone brighter than ever before. Years later, after Marlowe had passed on and the lighthouse had stood through countless storms, a new keeper arrived, a young man named Elias, eager to continue the work that Marlowe had begun. As he stood at the top of the lighthouse for the first time, looking out at the vast expanse of the sea, he felt a deep sense of responsibility. The legacy of Marlowe, of Jonas, and of the lighthouse was now in his hands. He understood, in that moment, that the light wasn't just a beam cutting through the fog. It was a symbol of hope, a guiding force for those lost in the darkness. As Elias tended to the lighthouse, he often thought of the stories he had heard about Marlowe and the sailor Jonas, and the lesson they had imparted. The moral of the story was clear. No matter how dark the world may seem, there is always light to guide us home. And as long as there was someone to keep the light burning, hope would never be lost. Underscore 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 underscore. Moral of the story. The lighthouse keeper's secret was not just about the light itself, but the understanding that light, whether physical or metaphorical, has the power to heal, guide, and transform. It is the light of hope, compassion, and kindness that gives us the strength to move forward, even in the darkest of times. Story 3. The Dream Weaver's Garden. High atop a mountain shrouded in clouds, there existed a garden that only a few had ever seen. It was said to be tended by a mysterious figure known as the Dream Weaver. The garden's flowers bloomed only under the moonlight, their petals glowing with colors that defied description. Each flower was unique, and when touched, it would release a fragrance that transported the soul to another world. One night, a curious child named Lila found her way to the garden. Guided by a silver moth, she climbed the mountain, her heart filled with wonder. When she arrived, the Dream Weaver appeared, a figure cloaked in robes woven from starlight. They welcomed her with a gentle smile and invited her to explore. As Lila wandered through the garden, she touched a flower that smelled like rain on a summer day. Instantly, she was transported to a memory of playing in puddles with her sister. Another flower smelled of freshly baked bread, and she found herself reliving mornings in her grandmother's kitchen. Each bloom held a fragment of her life, piecing together a mosaic of joy, love, and comfort. The Dream Weaver explained that the garden was a sanctuary for those who had lost their way, a place where memories and dreams intertwined. Lila spent what felt like hours there, though it could have been days. When she finally descended the mountain, she carried the tranquility of the garden within her, and her dreams were forever filled with its magic. Over the years, Lila would often think back to the garden, its essence woven into her soul, guiding her through life's storms. Story 4. The Whispering Sea. In a quiet coastal village, the sea was known to whisper secrets to those who listened closely. The villagers believed that the ocean held the memories of all who had sailed upon it, and its waves carried stories of love, loss, and adventure. A fisherman named Caleb, known for his kind heart and gentle demeanor, would often sit by the shore after his daily catch, listening to the whispers. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he heard a voice clearer than ever before. It was a melody, soft and haunting, calling him to the water. Intrigued, Caleb followed the sound to a hidden cove where he discovered a woman with hair like sea foam and eyes that mirrored the ocean. She introduced herself as Meris, a guardian of the sea's stories. She explained that the whispers Caleb heard were fragments of tales left behind by sailors and travelers. Meris invited Caleb to sit with her and listen, and together they wove the fragments into full stories, bringing them to life. Night after night, Caleb returned to the cove, and the two grew close, their bond deepening with every tale. When Caleb's time on land came to an end, Meris gifted him a pearl that glowed with the light of the moon. She promised it would guide him back to her, no matter where his journey took him. Caleb sailed into the horizon, his heart filled with peace, knowing the whispers of the sea would always lead him home. The village, too, felt the impact of Caleb's stories, which brought them closer to the ocean's mysteries. Story 5. The Clockmaker's Haven. In a quaint village nestled in a valley, there lived a clockmaker named Elias. His shop was unlike any other, filled with clocks that didn't just tell time but seemed to hold it. Each clock was meticulously crafted, with intricate designs and mechanisms that ticked in harmony with the world. Elias had a secret: his clocks could slow down or speed up time for those who needed it most. A mother overwhelmed by her busy life could touch a clock and feel as though an hour stretched into a day. A child waiting for a loved one's return could hold a pocket watch and feel time fly by. One day, a traveler named Amora entered Elias's shop. She was a painter who had lost her inspiration and felt as though time had become her enemy. Elias gifted her a small, golden clock and told her to carry it with her. As Amora traveled, the clock's ticking seemed to sync with her heartbeat, and she began to notice beauty in the smallest things: the way sunlight danced on water, the laughter of children, the colors of dawn. Amora's paintings came to life once more, each stroke filled with the essence of the moment she cherished. She returned to the village to thank Elias, only to find his shop had disappeared. In its place was a sundial, inscribed with the words, "Time is a gift, treasure it well." The villagers often gathered around the sundial, sharing stories of how Elias's clocks had changed their lives, ensuring his legacy would never fade.